Feared and respected in equal measure. Spa-Francorchamps is quite simply one of the greatest racing circuits on Earth. They've been hosting Grand Prix here since 1925, and in 2024, Formula One arrives here with the World Championship poised perfectly. It's the last race before the summer break. Welcome to F1 TV. Welcome to your weekend warm-up. Welcome, folks, to the pit lane here with me, Will Buxton, with Ruth Buscombe alongside me. But before we preview this weekend, let's take a little look back at the Hungarian Grand Prix.
This is the Hungarian Grand Prix. Lando Norris will lead Oscar Piastri on the grid for McLaren. Can today be their day? Lando Norris chops across his teammate. Piastri takes the lead of the race. Verstappen off the road.
Let's see how you do under pressure.
Lando Norris into the pits.
Can he undercut Piastri from here?
Lando Norris goes past his teammate.
Don't worry about Lando. We'll manage that situation.
That's fascinating.
Lando, mate, we'd like to re-establish the order.
We should have Buxton first. It
Doesn't matter.
I mean, it does.
This is Messi from McLaren.
Verstappen, he died this time.
Oh, he locks up and he makes contact with his old rival.
Trying to rescue Russell.
It's childish.
Lando, you've proved your point. I'm trying to protect you, mate. You're going to need Oscar, and you're going to need the team. Do it now.
Yeah, you don't need to say anything.
For the first time in Formula One, Oscar Piastri wins.
Really good weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Here's why we love this sport so much.
A McLaren 1-2, a first-time winner, but controversy nevertheless. We're going to dig into all of that in just a moment, but let's take a look at the Drivers' Championship points after that thrilling Hungarian Grand Prix just 4 days ago. Max Verstappen still leads the Drivers' Championship on 265 from Lando Norris on 189. Oscar Piastri fifth on 149. Looking down the running order of the points in the Drivers' Championship. Yuki Tsunoda, interesting, on 22. That's his car number. Moving to the Constructors' Championship, and this is where it's getting really, really interesting, because McLaren are now up to second place and hunting down Red Bull Racing. 51 points, the gap between the seemingly dominant, irrepressible, unbeatable Red Bull Racing and McLaren, who have not won a Constructors' Championship this millennium. Right, Ruth, let's get into it. That is a stat, isn't it? That is a stat.
Technically accurate. It seems a little mean, but it is technically accurate. I'll give you that.
That's a stat. Ruth, the Hungarian Grand Prix, let's unpack it. It was a McLaren 1-2, but not without controversy. Lando Norris, of course, put into the lead by the strategic decisions of the team, then forced to give up that position. It was a tricky afternoon, as Jolyon Palmer said, a messy afternoon.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, you want to be so happy. They've worked so hard. You know, just a few years ago, they're getting knocked out in Q1, and it is a phenomenally great effort from everybody in the team, you know, to have P1 and P2, and that is the first and most important thing. And it does show just how difficult life is for strategists. You know, it's not a walk in the park, this strategy game. And even, you know, when you actually have, you know, secure lead of the race, there's still things you can get wrong. There's still things that you can learn from. And every race is a way where you learn more, isn't it?
This is a topic we've been discussing all season, though. We look back at races like Imola, where they could have won, at Silverstone, at Canada, where they should have won. The questions are being levied at that pit wall, at the decisions being taken there. Is this a case of McLaren almost being surprised to find themselves as competitive as they are and fighting for these wins?
Well, I think that's kind of exactly what Stella was kind of saying, in that, you know, that they weren't ever expecting to be in these positions. They're not used to being in these positions. And as you say, that is kind of fair, in that, you know, you looked at Red Bull, you look at how many years they had fighting at the front, you look at Mercedes, you look at how many years they have fighting at the front, and it's an entirely different psychological, you know, ball game. I mean, I think Budapest is a great example. 2021, remember, like, Lewis Hamilton was the only car on the grid. They made a strategic error back there, and they've been winning for years. So, you know, did they do the best job they could, you know, last week? No, but like, as strategists, it's not about being perfect. It's about being, on average, better than the other guy, just like we're driving. And last week, in terms of strategic errors, it wasn't just them. You know, Red Bull made a rare drop in terms of strategic errors. Mercedes made strategic errors on the Saturday and then were brilliant on the Sunday. You know, it shows just how close the racing is, that everyone up and down the pit lane is making great calls and bad calls, you know, myself included. That's what we do in strategy. It's all about being the best you can be, on average.
Oscar Piastri had a great day out there, of course, but was caught behind Lando Norris after those final stops. Lando getting the undercut. This is how the team tried to convince Lando to give that position back.
Lando, he can't catch you up. You've proved your point, and it really doesn't matter.
He's on much bigger tires, much faster, he's still. I mean, I would have tried to undercut anyway. If I didn't, I would have gone long.
Mate, we did the stop sequence in this order for the good of the team.
Yeah, I'm fighting for a championship.
Okay,
No,
I'm trying to protect you, mate. I promise, I'm trying to protect you. So if there's a safety car now, it's going to make this very awkward. Please do it now.
Yeah, you don't need to say anything.
Ruth, I watched that Grand Prix from home, and I got to tell you, those last 20 laps, I was on the edge of the sofa, really actually genuinely nervous about what was going to happen. Should Lando have ever been put in that position? And then having been put in that position, should he have been given clearer instructions? And when he didn't listen to those instructions, should Andrea Stella have got on the phone and said, this is the boss, you do what we tell you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out if they're ever in the same situation again, because, you know, it is different in different teams. You know, I came from Ferrari as a first experience where, you know, the goal of Ferrari is to win the Drivers' Championship, and the, you know, Constructors' Championship is secondary. That's a very well-known fact around the pit lane. And then for other teams, it's the Constructors' Championship. So as you say, it's going to be so interesting to see how now they have been in that position. They have had to kind of manage those drivers. And they did have, you know, a situation where Oscar initially was the faster of the two cars. He did that off on lap 33, and it was only after that off that he dropped that car pace. So, you know, it must have been car damage, which is why, you know, what Lando was saying there on the radio was correct. He can't catch him up. He was faster the second half of the race.
You and your strategy team at F1 actually ran the numbers after the race to see what would have happened had they pitted Oscar first.
Yeah, so, you know, this is always a little bit subjective, guys. But if those two cars were racing each other, so, you know, they may have said, play nice, your teammates hold position, which is very normal, that happens a lot. But if they were purely racing each other with the delta paces we actually saw after that off, with the seemingly looked like Oscar's car was damaged because it went quite a lot slower, nearly a second sometimes, some of the laps. Now, Lando would have probably overtaken in 3 laps to the end. Don't at me, it was just on average overtaking pace, purely numbers based.
But that's fascinating in and of itself. Whether he would have been allowed to fight him, whether the rules of engagement say you can't do that, we're not quite sure. But let's hear from the drivers themselves, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, talking to Mike Seymour earlier today.
Lando, good to see you. A few days to reflect on everything that happened in Hungary. How do you feel about it now? Obviously, still a great result for the team with the 1-2 finish.
Yes, I mean, obviously we've reviewed everything. But like you're saying, main point is we had a 1-2. And I was super happy with that. The whole team were very happy. Yeah, could I have done things probably a little bit differently? Yes, but that's from my side and the team's side to discuss, and that's what we've done. So coming into this weekend to try and repeat it in terms of result.
Oscar, congratulations again. How does it feel to be called a Grand Prix winner now? Has it fully sunk in yet? And
yeah, yes, I think it has. I mean, it's certainly sunk in more than it had immediately post-race. But I don't think it changes the world for me. I mean, it's nice to have that achievement, but my way of working and trying to improve myself is going to be exactly the same. So, yeah, nice to have that achievement. Nice to have, you know, the first one, and I think for the whole team, an incredible weekend, scoring the most amount of points that we could. But it doesn't change much apart from that. Just trying to repeat that every weekend and keep growing. You know, I know that. That I've won a race, but it doesn't mean it was a perfect race. So until I have perfect races, then I'm never going to be fully satisfied.
Not a perfect race, Ruth, as you said. He went off, he damaged his car. Other than that, a pretty great afternoon for him. It was really the strategy that left him behind Lando Norris and left that sour taste for many people at the end of the Grand Prix, almost not allowing him to celebrate what would have been that first win as much as he might have done. Are we at a position now, Ruth, with McLaren taking great chunks out of Red Bull weekend after weekend in the Constructors, where McLaren need to focus on one driver if they're to have a shot in the Drivers' Championship. Because I had a chat with Max Verstappen earlier today. You'll be able to see that interview on the pre-race show on Sunday. And I said, McLaren seemingly don't believe that they're in with a shot at the Drivers' Championship. Do you believe that Lando has a shot? And Max was like, absolutely. Like, Lando has a real shot at this World Championship. He sees that threat very, very seriously. McLaren seemingly don't realise they're in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably showing my Ferrari upbringing. Yeah. But for me, and then I think Seb said it really well in Mexico in 2018, that until he mathematically could not win the Drivers' Championship, he could win the Drivers' Championship. And that's why, the rest of us were going, this is all sorted. Mexico 2018. He arrived happy and left sad, because until he couldn't win it, he couldn't win it. And I completely agree. But again, I'm probably showing my Ferrari upbringing. I think Lando can win it until he can't.
I totally agree. I genuinely do agree. But does that mean Lando should have held on to the win? Should they have maintained that position? Should they have asked him to give it up? Should Lando himself have done a Seb and a multi-21 and gone, you guys might not think about the Drivers' Championship, but I'm thinking about the Drivers' Championship, and you know what? If you're not going to take control of it, I'm going to take control of it. I'm going to win the race.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, isn't it? I mean, if you think about the fact that, the money is given out on the Constructors' Championship, and not everybody knows this, but the Drivers' Championship, there's actually no cash.
Yeah.
You don't actually win anything, but the price that you put on winning a Drivers' Championship, to quote Ferrari, is you can't put a number on it, because it's what people are actually emotionally connected to more than a manufacturer, more than a car. So yeah, like I say, I'm probably showing my Ferrari here. I'd put it all on Lando at this point, but then I would say, the king is dead, long live the king. If next season it was Oscar, I'd go straight for Oscar. But now I really am showing my Ferrari, aren't I?
But this is where it gets fascinating. We talk about the championship, the drivers versus the constructors. Let's take a look at what's actually gone on in the Constructors' Championship this year, because it's fascinating. Red Bull, of course, launching that heavily revised car for this year, straight out of the blocks. Ferrari caught them back up with the brilliant result in Australia, but then Red Bull went on a tear. Now, when we get to Miami, Lando Norris's win, that was the weekend when McLaren brought their big upgrade package. Watch their trajectory from here, a straight line as Red Bull have started to plateau and as Sergio Perez's results started to tail off. Red Bull essentially becoming a one-car team, and then last time out overtaking Ferrari for McLaren to take second in the Constructors' Championship. Ruth, Max Verstappen right now is a single-car team at Red Bull Racing. Checo is not bringing in the results that they need in the Constructors' Championship. What have they got to do? What has Checo got to do? Because there's so much talk this weekend that Checo could be out after this race here in Belgium.
I mean, simply put, score more points. I mean, it's a simple but a difficult answer in that, everyone can see the trajectory of those lines. The Constructors' Championship is a team sport, and you need both of your drivers to be contributing points towards it. So that's probably quite a very boring engineering answer, but I think it's the right one.
It's the right answer, Ruth. But also, listen, we talk about McLaren, we talk about that brilliant 1-2. Could it have been Lando? Should it have been Lando in P1? This all on a day when Max Verstappen wasn't even on the podium in Hungary. Contact with Lewis Hamilton during the race itself. Alex Brundle, back in the studio. I know you really want to pour through this and give us your insight as to what went down.
Yeah, I really do. It's an interesting one, this. Interesting from a stewarding perspective, but also interesting from the perspective of why the drivers do what they do. Let's whiz through it from the helicam that we all saw during the international feed of the race. Verstappen, of course, from a long way back, down the inside. He's got two things to prove here with regards to the guidelines of how you get a move done. Firstly, he has to be in control of the car throughout the manoeuvre. Secondly, he has to be able to prove, and the wording is important here, that he could have completed the manoeuvre on track. Not just stay on track, but complete the manoeuvre on track. I think given the approach feed of Verstappen here, it's pretty clear that even if he was able to stay on the racetrack, he wouldn't have been able to complete the move on the racetrack. So why then, which I agree with, did the stewards consider this a racing incident? Well, we have to look at Lewis Hamilton's on board from that. And it's all about his steering angle as he makes his way down towards turn one. Effectively, this is a new angle which we could see first time on weekend warm-up. And what's laid at Hamilton's door here is he could have done more to overcome or perhaps avoid the contact here. It's this turn of the steering wheel in towards the apex for Lewis Hamilton that the stewards are considering his 50-50 part of the incident. Now, if Verstappen is in control here, Hamilton gets a penalty. It's the fact that Verstappen is out of control which has led to the fact that it's a racing incident between the two of them. So Verstappen out of control, Hamilton could have made more effort to deviate from his line and avoid contact, therefore considered a racing incident by the stewards. The only really subjective point here considered by some is, did Hamilton's change in line on the way into the corner cause Verstappen to lock up? So here Verstappen is doing 18 kilometres per hour more than Lewis Hamilton. He takes 0.4 seconds out of him on the way into the apex of the corner. And pretty objectively, although Hamilton arcs into the corner slightly early, Verstappen is not going to make the corner whether Hamilton deviates from his line or not. So that's what the stewards considered. I agree, that's a racing incident, but interesting psychology between these two old rivals, isn't it, Mr. Buxton?
It is indeed, my friend. Very, very interesting. Ruth, do you think that those two race each other slightly differently than they race other people? Although with Austria as a recent example and Max's fights there with Lando Norris, perhaps not?
Yeah, I mean, we have databases in teams of how drivers race each other because it's a real phenomena that started. The Fernando Alonso effect is probably how it's called. That man races people very differently depending on how he is. Phenomenal driver, but yeah, he does race drivers very differently. So I would agree. I think you know the people that you're racing against. You know how they race against. Like Daniel Ricciardo always used to talk about this back in 2014 in terms of overtaking, and that he would kind of go and try and attack people in certain ways based on how they were, which is kind of how he made his name and established himself. So, yeah, I do think, but also, yeah, racing incident in it.
Max Verstappen will have a tough job. He told me just before we started the interview today he will be taking a grid penalty this weekend. So that's confirmed from Max himself. We don't know the exact number yet. It depends how many component parts he takes in the back of his Red Bull Racing car. But wherever he starts, it will not be from the top 10. That much is for sure. Sergio Perez, if the Red Bull is as fast as we are expecting this weekend, really needs to get that car as far up the grid as humanly possible, because one team alongside McLaren hoping for a good weekend are those guys down there at Mercedes. George Russell just walking out in the blue cap. Ruth, that car loves the cooler conditions. It is going to rain tomorrow. It is going to rain on Saturday. That will bring the temperatures right down. Will it play to Mercedes' strengths?
Yes, but
always a but.
But the race is so important here, and it's a race where you have to actually watch the whole thing because, you have to be in it to win it, and then the last 10 laps here are the most important last 10 laps because it's all about how fast you are in race trim. And on paper, they go in third fastest based on their configuration. Obviously, things can change. They may make a step, but at the moment, they've got that gap that they need to close. McLaren also has got that gap that they need to close between the Red Bull, but thankfully the faster Red Bull is starting behind them.
It is remarkable here. When it is sunny, it is sweltering. When it is not sunny, it is grey and dreary and utterly horrible. But that's Spa-Francorchamps. That's why we love it. News arriving at the track this morning when we got here. Esteban Ocon has signed for Haas, continuing the trend of stepping into a seat vacated by Nico Hülkenberg. He did it when he moved to Force India, and Nico went to Renault. Then Nico left Renault to go to Haas, and he jumped and did all. He's followed him every single step of the way.
Maximum effort.
Maximum effort, yes. So Esteban Ocon to Haas. Interestingly, linking back up with Ayo Komatsu, who engineered him, I should say, for his very first F1 test with Lotus back in the day, back in 2014.
Yeah, and gets to have another tall, thin teammate, which actually is not just a fun fact that we think potentially, please fact check this, we think it could be the tallest cumulative lineup ever in history. We're not sure.
Ollie's convinced he's taller than Esteban as well. There's going to be
like a height
taller
off
between the two of them.
But actually, from a design perspective, that's actually really useful.
Yeah.
Because their centre of gravity is fairly similar. And obviously with the driver weights going up by 2 kilograms next year, so they've got a bit of margin to bulk up as well if they want to hit the gym. But purely from a design perspective, it is actually quite helpful if your drivers are a similar weight distribution and height.
Well, it's not just the height, is it? It's their build, everything. They're very, very similar, quite wiry, tall. Right, let's hear from Esteban Ocon.
Esteban, good to see you. Congratulations, obviously, on the new deal with Haas. Can you tell us how it all came about? How important was AO, and how much are you looking forward to that new chapter in your career?
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Obviously, great to be finally able to talk about it. It's an exciting challenge that we have ahead. The team has been on a massively upward trajectory at the moment, and they want to keep that going. Obviously I have a very long history with Hayao, who's been my first race engineer in Formula One 10 years ago now, and he's convinced me with his plan where they want to head to. I got the same goal as they have, and it is fantastic to be finally teaming up.
What has AO told you about the short, medium, long-term goals of the team, and what about your new teammate for next year as well, Ollie Behrman?
Yeah, they are competitors and they want to improve, step by step they want to get better. They have, as I said, big plans ahead to, get that on the way and to improve, the situation they are in, and they are already doing that at the moment. So it is exciting. As I said, it is a new challenge for me, which I'm very much looking forward to, and to be racing with Ollie as well. He's an exciting young prospect. Many people say he's going to be a future world champion, so I look forward to be teaming up with him and hopefully push the team forward.
Thanks, Esteban. Good luck.
We were talking to Ollie Behrman earlier today, and he said how much he was looking forward to racing with Esteban Ocon. So that is another team's lineup confirmed. Other news coming into today down at Alpine, of course, because Esteban is leaving Alpine. They have a new livery this weekend. Ruth, it's a Deadpool Wolverine livery.
I'm such a fan.
It's great.
I'm such a fan.
Gasly wearing a Wolverine helmet this weekend. Esteban wearing the Deadpool one. Esteban did say that he had full Deadpool overalls. I've seen them. They're not. They're just red overalls. I'm actually quite disappointed. I was hoping for the full Wolverine outfit from Gasly. And full...
Academy race, we could get Ladypool.
That would have been amazing. But sadly, all is not tickety-boo over there at Alpine. At the moment, news continues, or rumours, I should say, continue to be spread about the team looking towards a Mercedes deal for engines, and not just engines, but engines, gearbox, the whole rear end of the car. It looks like it's becoming ever closer, some saying that it may come as early as 2025, which appears to be news to all of the 500 workers over at Viry-Châtillon, which currently make the Renault power unit in the back of the Alpine. Very strict union laws over there, so we have to see exactly how that works out for Alpine, but tricky times talk as well. Bruno Famin may be under some pressure as team principal at Alpine, but we will keep you updated over the course of the weekend and coming weekends, exactly how everything transpires down there at Alpine. Right, we're here in Spa. It is one of the world's great circuits. Alex Brundle is going to take us around the track.
Around the track, indeed, or certain bits of the track. It's an outlier, this one, but it's an outlier in terms of a very specific combination metrics called sensitivity to efficiency. Sensitivity to efficiency is the word I was attempting. And that's because you have one of the highest periods of VMAX anywhere in Formula One at the end of the Kemmel Straight. It's a long period where the cars are going towards the higher speed allowable by the drag configuration that they're on. But you also have some of the highest speed grip limited apexes in Formula One. Those are the apexes where you're traveling at an extremely high speed, but you're also grip limited in terms of the speed that you can take. That means that cars need both downforce and the ability to relinquish drag in order to do a fast lap of this racetrack. So much so, and it's such an outlier in terms of being reliant on this metric, that actually teams often run an aero configuration which is not immediately centred to the track, but is their most efficient downforce configuration that fits within the error bars of the race circuit, meaning that we get these battles around the racetrack where some teams are extremely fast through this flat-out first sector, then much slower through the middle sector and fast again through the high-speed third sector. Some teams are faster in the middle. This was highlighted last year when McLaren picked a very high downforce setup and was swamped during the race. So there's a Bible that comes out in engineering terms at the beginning of each race weekend. It's the FIA upgrades document. If you're interested in the runners and riders this weekend, make sure you check it. Anyone with a blank list under their name is in potential trouble this weekend. We saw that at Silverstone. Aero configurations that ditch drag for Mercedes and for McLaren helped them be much more competitive over the race weekend. And I'm really interested, Ruth, to know what you're seeing down in the pit lane. I know you've been scouting about in terms of what aero configurations and potential changes you might be able to see.
Yeah, exactly. So about this time of day is where you start to see people's initial aero configuration. Now, remember, they can change the wing, obviously. They've got 3 practice sessions. And it is one where you do look at what your neighbours are doing. But, can we get, breaking news from the pit lane? McLaren have a skinny wing. So last year, they ran that high downforce setup. They didn't actually have a wing that was, skinny enough to be able to kind of produce the efficiency that they needed. But if you do look at it down in the pit lane, that is very, very thin. In fact, it's even thinner than the one on the Red Bull, which somewhat surprisingly, at least for me, they've got quite a kind of, everything's low downforce here, but let's call it low-medium downforce. So it's a bigger wing than the one on the McLaren, which makes sense if you're Checo, maybe, to kind of improve your qualifying performance, but makes less sense if you are Max Verstappen and you need an overtaking special to come through from the back. So wouldn't surprise me if that wing, at least on Max's car, gets changed to a thinner one later in the race weekend.
The Red Bull proved, though, didn't it, that having that slightly larger rear wing, slightly more draggy rear wing, when you actually engage the DRS, it gave it more effect because you're opening it up. Brundle, I know that you've probably been having a little look at that. Red Bull are expecting to be the fastest outfit here this weekend. They've reverted back to the original setup of the car that we saw with the big haunches, the cannons down the side as well.
Potentially a hedge, though, Will. Potentially a hedge, because as we know, weather forecasting, ever reliable in Spa, is thinking potential rain throughout Friday and throughout Saturday. And what happens then? Of course, less of the time is in this area of the racetrack, and more of the time delivered from the cars happens between there and there. You spend more time in the corners, therefore there's more time to lose. So it is always the hedge here of drag versus downforce, but again, going to have to keep half an eye on the conditions this weekend. That Red Bull may be edging a little bit more towards wet or intermediate conditions in terms of their optimization.
Lovely stuff, Brundle. Thank you very much. We're running out of time in the show, but I will just tell you very quickly, big changes at Audi /Sauber over the last few days. Gone is Seidel, gone is Hoffman, in is former Ferrari man Mattia Binotto. We will be covering that throughout the weekend, and here is where you can see everything this weekend here at the Belgian Grand Prix on F1 TV, and it all starts tomorrow, Friday, with free practice 1 coming your way at 1:15 local time. Practice 2 at 4:45, rolling then into Saturday, 12:15. Again, practice 3, then your pre-quali show live at 3:30 local time. The race itself, your pre-race show, 2 p.m. on Sunday. F1 Fantasy, of course. Get your teams locked in before qualifying. Ruth, could be a tough one this weekend to make your minds up about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's still McLaren. I think they're going to be slightly slower in the race, but they're going to qualify ahead versus Max, and whether or not he's practiced doing that overtake in Blanchimont that he did in 2015. Maybe on a video game. I don't know, but he did it quite well that time.
He won't be able to practice it on the video game. Helmut Marko's told him what time he has to go to bed, and he's taken the Wi-Fi code and nicked his PlayStation. Apologise to GP, young man. That's what he said. Right, that's it. That's your show. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. It's going to be a great weekend.
Motor racing history everywhere you look.
This is the Belgian Grand Prix.
Great reaction time for Leclerc, who's got the lead. Oh, they made contact! Gaining with every metre. It's a classic track. What a move from Esteban Ocon! Max Verstappen wins the Belgian Grand Prix.
What an unbelievable race again.